Hi, this is Tamara at mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Turkey Squish and, to a lesser extent, the Mini Turkey Squish, both of which you'll find as free crochet patterns on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description or go to your favorite search engine and simply type in Moogly Turkey Squish and it should pop right up. You'll want to be able to follow along with the written pattern for whichever version you're making. To make this larger version, I used a USL 8mm crochet hook and Bernat blanket in 4 colors: taupe, sun-soaked, crimson, and orange leaf, but you should use whichever colors, brown, yellow, red, and orange, appeal to you. I also filled this larger version with a 10-inch microbead pillow ball, but you can use that or fiberfill. I also used 24mm safety eyes, and I do recommend you have some stitch markers handy. And here is our little guy. This is the Mini Turkey Squish made with Bernat Maker Minis. Again, this is a very similar pattern. I've made just a few changes to make this smaller version, so whichever turkey squish you decide to make sure you've got the written pattern for that squish handy. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, the turkey squish body is pretty much the same as you'd find in the chicken or the duck, and it's all half double crochet stitches worked in the round. All of the squishes have the same basic body shape with a few alterations depending on what sort of animal they are. So if you need to get this one started, I would say you can look at the tutorial for the ladybug squish. Now, the parts that are unique for our turkey today are the beak right here, the wattle, and the feathers. If you're looking for help with the feet, they're the same ones as our chicken squish feet. So you can go to the tutorial for the chicken squish. The feet tutorial starts around the 13.5-minute mark, so you can find that one there. So as I say, today we're really going to be focusing in on the beak, the wattle, and the feathers. And both of those, or rather all of those, I should say, are repeated in the Mini Turkey Squish. The beak is a little bit smaller, the wattle's a little bit shorter, and the feathers themselves are a little bit shorter as well. So let's go ahead and go over these super fun pieces for our turkey squishes. Now, before I forget, there is one small change that I made to the body and the belly pieces for this one that are a little different from the way that I did the chicken and the duck, and that is in the wings right here. They're essentially the same stitches, but in this pattern, I've changed them to linked doubles and linked treble crochets, which creates a more solid piece of fabric. Because I fill mine with a pillow ball, we don't get fiberfill in this wing section, and so having these a little bit more solid, I think, gives an even better little wing. So let's go ahead and go over that now. So I'm going to use the Bernat Maker Mini to demonstrate this. Because of the stitch definition, it's a little bit easier to see the stitch as we go here. So this is when you're making the wings, which will be in round 12 of the bottom half of the body and round 14 of the top half of the body. So we work our pattern as written all the way around, just as we've been doing before in half double crochet, but then we come to these linked stitches. So we start with the section in our brackets, 2 LDC, which is linked double crochet in the next stitch, 3 LTR, which is linked treble crochet in the next stitch, and 2 LDC, linked double crochet in the stitch after that. So we're going to be working over the next 3 stitches. So first things first, we need to make 2 linked double crochet in the next stitch. So to begin that, what we're going to do is, rather than yarning over as we normally would to begin a double crochet, we're actually going to take our hook and go right under that horizontal bar here, right under the top 2 loops. Now, normally when we work into a stitch, as you know, we go under those top 2 loops right here. For this one, we're going to go from the top underneath this loop right here of our half double crochet. So it can be difficult. As you can see, it's very easy to accidentally pull your loop right, or your hook right out of the loop, but you want to try and just get your hook right under that loop right there, like so. Then we can yarn over and pull up a loop. Now this is going to be just like our yarn over, but you can see it's linked to the previous stitch. So now we can go into that next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and finish our double crochet just as we normally would. Yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So there is our first linked double crochet. I get a little bit more yarn pulled up here from my skein. Now we can do a second one right in that same stitch. So now we're going to go into that horizontal bar there in the middle of this stitch, always go into the previous stitch. We don't go back to that first one. We just go into the stitch we just made. So we want to go from the top, right underneath that bar, yarn over and pull up our loop. Then we can go right back in that same stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So that's our 2 linked double crochet in that first one. Now we need 3 linked treble crochet in the next stitch. So for a treble crochet, normally we would yarn over twice. We've only got 1 bar to pick up a yarn over from here in the previous stitch. So we're going to yarn over once, then go through that horizontal bar of the previous stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop. Now we've got our 2 yarn overs essentially. We can go right into that next stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, and then finish our treble like we normally would. Yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2 again. Now we're set up because the previous stitch is a treble. Our next 2 trebles, we've got bars there for us to go into. So we go right under that top one there, yarn over and pull up a loop. Then we go right down to the next one, yarn over and pull up our loop. Then we go right back into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, and then finish off our treble. Yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So that's 2 in that stitch. We need 1 more. So now we're going to go, same thing, under that top horizontal bar, pull up our loop, under the next horizontal bar, pull up a loop, and finally back into that same stitch 1 more time for our 3rd linked treble crochet. We just work it off like a regular treble. So if we go back to our instructions, the next thing we do is work 2 linked double crochets in the next stitch. We're creating the curve of that wing. So how do we go from a treble down to a double? Well, the way I like to do it for this pattern is for this next one, when we go to pick up the loops here for our yarn over, we're going to go under that top one and the bottom one, like so, yarn over, and just pull up 1 loop through both. So now we've got our 1 yarn over. We can go right to the next stitch. And when you work a bunch of stitches into 1 stitch like this, it can try and hide that next stitch a little bit. So you can go ahead and pull those right out of the way if you want to, or if you need to get to that next stitch easily. Then we can yarn over and pull up our loop and finish our double crochet as normal. So now we need 1 more linked double crochet. So we go under that horizontal bar, right into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, and finish our double crochet. So after that, the instructions say to half double crochet in the next 35 stitches. So you just go right back to half double crocheting in each stitch around until you get to the other side here. Well, you'll repeat that series of stitches for the other wing on the other side of both the belly and the top half of the body, both the top and the bottom halves. So now let's make our beak. So you're going to grab your yellow color, and I've gone ahead and put a slip knot on my hook. To begin row 1, we then chain 6. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There we go. Then we are going to skip the chain closest to the hook and single crochet in each remaining chain across for a total of 5 stitches. Now, I would recommend that you work into the bottom hump of the chain when you do this, as it leaves those top 2 loops as sort of a finished edge at the top of your beak. So I'm going to skip the one closest to my hook right there and go right to the next one. Now, of course, if you prefer working into a different part of the chain and you prefer that look, you can absolutely work into whichever part of the chain you prefer. After all, it's your project, and you need to please yourself. So I'm just working my single crochets right across here, 1 in each stitch. And I didn't leave a super long tail on this end, but I did leave a pretty decent tail, and that's because I like to use both tails when I'm attaching my pieces to the other pieces, when I'm sewing my amigurumi pieces together. I find that having sort of 2 anchors, I can put down one end and use the other end to sew, really helps hold it in place. So now I've got my 5 single crochets right here. So we can get ready here for row 2. We're going to turn and chain 1, or chain 1 and turn, however you like to do it. And then we're going to single crochet 2 together. So we go right in that first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, go to the second stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through both of those loops. So that's our first single crochet 2 together. Then we single crochet in the next stitch, and then single crochet 2 together over the last 2 stitches. So pull up a loop from each of those, yarn over, and pull through to finish. Now we've just got 3 stitches here at the end of row 2. So for row 3, we're going to chain 1 and turn, or turn and chain 1. And now we're going to single crochet 3 together. So we turn all 3 of these stitches into one final stitch here. So we're creating a nice sharp triangle shape for our beak. So we go into the first stitch and pull up a loop, into the second stitch and pull up a loop, and into the third stitch and pull up a loop. Now with all 4 loops on our hook, it's a good idea to give those a little bit of a pull. We don't want them too tight, and then you can yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops. There we go. And now we can go ahead and finish off our yarn. So when we break our yarn here, we do want to leave a long tail for sewing. So the way I like to do that is just go around the piece that I'm going to be sewing on about 3 times or so. I always find that that's plenty, usually more than enough, but I'd rather have more than enough than not have enough and have to cut another piece of yarn. So I'll just go ahead and cut that off right there. Plenty of length there for sewing it on, and then I'll just yarn over, find the hook there we go, and pull that tail end on through. There we go. So now when we go to sew on our beak, we can flip it over here, and you can see by working into that underneath hump, we've got this nice finished looking edge, so it can be right at the top of our beak. We can put that end in, then put that end in, and use it to sew our beak right onto our body. Up next, we're going to make the wattle, which is that red sort of dangly thing that hangs from a turkey's beak. So I'm using my red yarn. I'm going to start by chaining 9. I've already got my slip knot on there. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Then we're going to skip the 2 chains closest to the hook. And again, I want to work into that underneath hump to create just sort of a finished looking edge on the both sides of my wattle, really. So now, like I say, I'm going to skip those first 2 chains, 1 and 2. So there's the third one. And we are going to work a double crochet in the next 3. So we skip 2, double crochet in the next 3. So there's 1 double crochet, and then a double crochet in the next, and a double crochet in the stitch after that. There we are. Then we half double crochet in the next 2. Just take our time there, find each chain. So there's 1 and 2, like so. You can see our wattle starting to narrow down. And then we single crochet in the next chain. And if you've done your counting right, you should have 1 chain left. So we slip stitch right in that last chain. And then that's it. We are done with our crocheting. So once again, we want to break our yarn, leaving a long tail for sewing on. But when I sewed my wattle on, I prefer to just sew sort of these last couple of stitches here and leave the rest to dangle loose like a real wattle would. So we don't need to leave nearly as much length to sew this one on. A good 18 inches or so, 24 if you want to be sure. Should be plenty. We can just cut our yarn, finish that off, like so. There we go. And now we've made our wattle. So next we need to make the tail feathers. As you can see, I did 1 in the yellow, 2 in the orange, and 2 in the red. And of course, if you want to mix up those colors and do different amounts, different colors, it's your turkey. It's totally up to you. But all of these feathers are made the same way. Then they're sewn on. I sewed on the yellow one first, then the orange sort of butted right up next to it, and then the red I tried to overlap a little bit, and I just sewed them on about halfway, leaving the tops free a little bit as well. So let's go ahead and make a tail feather together. Alrighty, so when you're making your tail feathers, I want you to start by leaving a longer tail than you normally would. For these, it's really helpful to have both of those tails be a little bit longer when it's time to sew them on. Then you can go ahead and make your slip knot. You can see it's not super long. That is more than enough. So after we make our long tail and make our slip knot here, we're going to start by chaining 2. Then we skip the chain closest to the hook and work 6 double crochets in that last chain. So just go ahead and work right in those. And as we make these, I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker in the top of that first double crochet there. We're not going to count that chain 2 as a stitch, so we can just ignore it. Mark the top of that first double crochet. And as we work our 6 single crochets in here, after we work them, I should say, we're going to join them. So we're going to be working in the round. So if you get to the point where you're working into this first stitch and you say, oh gosh, I'm kind of just going to be working right over that knot, it's fine. Go ahead, just push that tail end out of the way. Wherever you're comfy working in there, we just got to get 6 double crochets in there. Of course, now I've lost count, so let's see where we're at. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need one more. Get that worked right into that stitch there. Now, as you can see, it's naturally wanting to cup up. That's great. That's the way we want it to go. But one thing we want to do before we join with a slip stitch, our natural inclination, I think for most of us, would be to tuck that tail end in. We want it sticking out for sewing. So go ahead and make sure that tail end is sticking out before you join to that first double crochet there. Oops, let me get that in there. There we go. So we join with a slip stitch to that first stitch so we can work in the round, but we have that tail end sticking out ready and waiting for us for easier sewing on later. So at the end of round 1, you should have 6 double crochets. So for round 2, we're going to use a special stitch called a chainless starting double crochet. This is what I like to use instead of a double crochet chain 3 for the first double crochet of a round. So if you have a different double crochet substitute you prefer to use, that's fine. Or if you just really like the chain 3, you can do that as well. But to do the chainless starting double crochet, I pull my loop up to the height of a double crochet stitch, secure the top of that loop with my finger, yarn over with the loop itself, go out right on into that first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. Notice I'm still holding onto the top of that loop with my finger. Now I'm going to yarn over, pull through that loop and behind the yarn over, and now I can finally release that loop, yarn over, and pull through 2 to finish. So this is how I like to make the first double crochet of a round. Again, if you have a different solution that you prefer, a different substitute, or even just the standard chain 3, that's perfectly fine as well. So after we've got that chainless starting double crochet in that first stitch, we're going to double crochet in that stitch as well. So we want 2 double crochets, however you make them, worked into that first stitch. Then we double crochet in the next 2 stitches. So there's 1 and 2, and then 2 double crochets in the next stitch. 1 and 2, right back in that same stitch again. And then we simply double crochet in the last 2 stitches. So there's 1 and 2. Now we are working in joined rounds here. So if you're somebody who has trouble telling where the slip stitch is, if you're worried you're going to accidentally work into it, then it can be a really good idea to go ahead and use a second stitch marker in the last stitch of each round. You put that in before you do your slip stitch, and that way you'll always know the first and last stitch and you won't accidentally work into that slip stitch. So now we can go ahead and slip stitch to that first stitch. There we go. And we have finished round 2 with a total of 8 stitches. Next is round 3, which is going to start the same way with a chainless starting double crochet or double crochet substitute and a double crochet right in that first stitch. So I will work my chainless starting double crochet the same way again. And if you'd like to see a different video tutorial for that, worked a little bit slower, I do have a separate video tutorial for that on my channel. So I'll again mark that top of that first stitch there, and then double crochet right in that same stitch again. And then I work 2 double crochets in the next stitch. Oop, there we go. Get that in there. I keep glancing down at my instructions and then my hook wants to move on me. There we go. So we have 2 double crochets in the first stitch, 2 double crochets in the next stitch, then double crochet in the next 2 stitches. So there's 1 in that stitch and 1 in the stitch after that. Then 2 double crochets in each of the next 2 stitches. So 2 double crochets in the next stitch. There's 1 and 2, and 2 double crochets in the stitch after that. 1 and 2. Then, to finish it up, we have a double crochet in each of the last 2 stitches. So 1 in that stitch, and then we've got 1 in that last stitch right there. It's our marked stitch, so we know we're in the right spot. And I can put my stitch marker right back in the top of that stitch. There we go. And then I can go ahead and join with a slip stitch. And we're all finished with round 3. Now rounds 4 through 7 are pretty simple. We just double crochet in each stitch all the way around. So let's do one of those together. Again, I'm going to start with my double crochet substitute for my first stitch. So I'm going to pull up my loop and go right in there and get that double crochet substitute made. Mark the top of that stitch with my stitch marker here. And then simply continue to work around. One double crochet in each stitch around. Not that first one, it's already worked with our double crochet substitute, but just double crochet in each stitch around. So at this point, you should have a total of 12 stitches in each round, and rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7, I do know how to count, are just giving our feather some height here, so they're all worked evenly. So I'm just working my way right around here. You can see I need to pull up a little bit more yarn from my beautiful orange color here, such a beautiful fall orange. So I just put a double crochet in each one of these. Got just a few of these stitches left. You can tell me in the comments if you're making the mini turkey squish or the full-size turkey squish. I always have so much fun designing these, and it's so great to hear your feedback and know which animals you'd like to see as well. So I've worked all the way around here to the last stitch, and go ahead and mark the top of that one. And then slip stitch right in that first stitch again. So that is how it looks worked through row 4, 5, 6, and 7. Again, just exactly like round 4, working each stitch around. So for now, let's go ahead and jump to round 8. So round 8 begins with an unusual stitch, a chainless starting double crochet / double crochet 2 together. So again, if you have a different way that you'd prefer to start this stitch, it's absolutely fine. Possibly the easiest way to do it would be to simply chain 2 and then double crochet in the next stitch and count that as your first stitch. But for now, let's do it the way it's written. We're going to pull up our loop here. Again, we're starting a chainless starting double crochet, so I'm going to secure the top of it, yarn over with a loop, go right into that first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through that loop, and behind the yarn over, I'm not going to release that loop. I'm going to yarn over again, go to the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. Now I will release that loop, yarn over and pull through all 3. So we've created a decrease right there that I think looks a lot like a standard double crochet decrease without that special stitch up front. Of course, in this fuzzy yarn, you can use whatever you like. It's probably going to look pretty darn good. So after we've got that done, then we double crochet 2 together over the next 2 stitches. We don't have to do a special stitch. We've got our height. So we go right to the next stitch, start a double crochet, stop with 2 loops left on the hook, yarn over, go to the next stitch, yarn over. When we get down to 3 loops, yarn over and pull through all 3. Then we double crochet in the next 2 stitches. So there's 1 and 2. And then we double crochet 2 together twice. So we go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up our loop, stop with 2 loops left on the hook, yarn over, go to the next stitch, pull up our loop, yarn over, stop with 3 loops left on the hook, yarn over, and pull through all 3. And then we do it again. Yarn over, go to the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. Yarn over, go to the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops to finish the stitch. Then we just double crochet in those last 2 stitches. And again, we should end in that final marked stitch so we know we're in exactly the right spot. So I'll just move my stitch marker, whoop, get that straightened out. There we go, right back up here. And then I can slip stitch to that first stitch, which is also marked, making it just that little bit easier. There we go. And here's a little shortened version of what it should look like at the end of round 8. Of course, if you're making the mini turkey squish, you're going to be skipping a lot of those rows and this last row and closing it up just like round 9. So for round 9, we want to close up the top of our feather, bringing it down to just 4 stitches left. So we're going to start again with our chainless starting double crochet 2 together. So again, whatever you'd like to do to create this decrease, however, if you have a preferred method, that's totally fine. I'm going to start my chainless starting double crochet, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over again, go to the next stitch, pull up my loop, yarn over and pull through 2. Now pull through all 3 of those loops. You can go ahead and mark that stitch if you'd like. It is our final round. There we go. And of course, that means I've got to pull up a little bit more yarn, always on the last one. There we go. Then we are going to continue. Basically, it says double crochet 2 together thrice, which is all the rest of the way around. So we yarn over, go to the next stitch, stop with 2 loops, yarn over, go to the next stitch. With 3 loops, we yarn over and pull through. We do it again, all the way around. Stop that double crochet with 2 loops, yarn over, go to the next stitch, yarn over, pull through 2, then yarn over and pull through 3. We've done that 3 times now, 1, 2, 3. So we should have 2 stitches left. There's that last marked stitch. So we know we're in the right spot. I'm going to go ahead and get that one out of the way. And we're going to double crochet 2 together of these last 2 stitches. So we start 1 there, start 1 in the second stitch. When we get down to 3 loops, yarn over and pull through. Now we can go ahead and join to that first stitch. I'm going to go ahead and get that stitch marker right on out of my way. We don't need it anymore at all. We're done stitching crochet stitches for our feather anyway. There we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave a little bit longer tail on this one, maybe closer to 24, 30 inches, something like that. Right here. Again, on the mini version, shrink that down. Don't need nearly that much length on the little guy. So after you've cut your length of yarn, go ahead and put it on your yarn needle, and then we can just go around those top few stitches of the last round to gather the top of it closed into a nice little point for our tail here. So when you feel like you've got that nice and closed up, then we want to go ahead and look at our turkey tail for a minute here. Make sure that our increases are along the sides, creating this really nice flat sort of tail feather shape. Of course, yours will be several rows longer. Then we're going to go ahead and weave in this long end till it's about halfway down the length of our feather. So one thing I like to do is make sure my bottom tail looks like it wants to be on this side. So we'll make this the back of our feather, meaning the side that will get sewn to our turkey. So I'm going to take my tail end here and I'm just going to start weaving it down about halfway through the length of the tail here. Basically, I want to have a tail at one end and a tail at the other end so I can sew my feather to the body about halfway or so through the length of the feather. If you'd like to sew the whole thing on, you go ahead and leave this right at the top so you can have it right there for sewing. But I'm going to take it about halfway down. Now, if you want to, you can catch the other side, especially as you get to about halfway through. Just dip in, go all the way through, pick up a stitch or something on the other side to flatten it out if you want to. This is optional. You don't have to. You can see here I've just picked up 1 stitch to sort of hold it into that shape. And now I've got this end sticking out about halfway down my feather. So I can go ahead and set this feather aside while I make the other ones, and then I will have these 2 ends super handy when it's time to sew it on. So now it's time to assemble our squish, and we're going to have several pieces. And in the written instructions, I've got pictures that lead you every step of the way. So first things first, we attach our safety eyes. I do recommend you use safety eyes, or if you're letting a child younger than the age of 3 play with it, you may want to embroider those on. But we put those on first. The important thing is to make sure they're opposite our long tail or our finished off, the final round of our top is back here. So we want to make sure these are the opposite side and they're centered in between our feathers. However far apart you'd like them to be, I like to make them just wide enough apart here for our beak. After you've got the eyes attached, then we go to the bottom half and we sew on our feet. Again, I like to sew on just the pads of the feet and sort of leave the toes loose, but you can sew them on all the way up if you prefer. Again, the feet tutorial is the same as the chicken feet, so I haven't replicated that here. If you want to follow along, the chicken squish tutorial will show you how to make those. We just flip one over. They're exactly the same, but we flip one over to create a mirror image, so we get these really cute feet along the bottom. You can see here I've gone out just a couple rows from the center there and sort of lined them up as best I could with those eyes, facing them out in this direction towards the wings and the eyes. Now, again, this part is still separate at this point. You want to sew on all these pieces before you attach the bottom and the top of the body together. It's a whole lot easier to do it that way. Once you've got those on, then you're going to go ahead and sew on the wattle. Note, we have not sewn on the beak. The beak is the last thing that gets sewn on. So we went eyes, then feet, then we come up here to the wattle. The wattle is going to be sewn onto the bottom half of the body as well. And so what you want to do is sort of mark the center stitch in between those wings and then go just to the right, just a little bit. That's where you're going to sew on your wattle. And you can see I've sewn on just those top couple of rows or stitches really there and left the rest hanging free. So this was our narrow end. This was our wide end with our double crochets. So I just used the tail ends of the wattle to sew it down right at the top of this bottom piece right here. And as I say, just a little bit, maybe 1-2 stitches tops to the right of center. So then the next thing you're going to do is sew the tail feathers to the top half of the body. Now, the way we make the top and the bottom half is our next to final rounds have the wings. So you can see those are the rounds that are sewn together around the wings right here. So we're going to be sewing our feathers just above that line, just above where we finished making the top half of our body. And as I talked about a little bit before, I sewed the yellow one, then the oranges, then the red, overlapping just a little bit. But of course, you can arrange them however you'd like to do it. And you can see here, I sewed up about halfway through, and I just took my time and sewed it to the body a little bit willy-nilly. I'm going to really pull it apart here so you can see my actual stitches, but I just sewed it down. Again, we don't have the filler in here. It's just an open shell at this point, so you can really get in there and sew on each one of those feathers as much as you'd like. I like to leave that top half or so free, but again, you can do it however you'd like. You could even stuff these if you wanted to create a really 3D effect. But I just sew those on and bury those ends again before we end up stuffing the ball inside. So after you've sewn on your tail feathers, your feet, your wattle, and attached or sewn on your eyes, then it's time to start matching up the top half of your body and the bottom half of your body with stitch markers. And you're going to use stitch markers. I recommend starting at a wing so you can match up those linked double crochets, linked double crochets, linked trebles, linked doubles. Make sure those match and then count out from there. Every few stitches, put in a stitch marker to hold it all the way around. Now, we're not putting the ball in at this point. We are just sewing. We're going to use our long tail, which should be somewhere right about here in back. We're going to use our long tail to start seaming, and we're just going to whip stitch. We just go through both layers. I have a separate tutorial on whip stitch if you need it. Go all the way around. Now the beak is not going to be here. Remember, we're going to have our eyes in the wattle. We're going to keep seaming to just about here. I have a picture of this. You can see right here in the written pattern. So we sew just past this eye, then pause for a minute, let that end hang, come back and sew on this beak. You can see here is the bottom of that first row. Here's the bottom of that last row. And I've put it right between the eyes and just overlapped the top of that wattle like so. So we want to be able to do that, as you can see right here, while it's still open. So we can really get in there with our hands, sew the beak on exactly where we want it. Once that's in and our end there is buried, then it is finally time. We can insert our pillow ball or go ahead and fill it up with fiberfill, however you decide to fill your turkey squish, and then we can pick up that end and resume seaming. We just want to make sure to put that beak. It goes right over the seam. It creates this really lovely face, so we want to make sure that we get that right there. Then we can continue seaming all the rest of the way around. Again, make sure you've matched up the stitches for those wings. We finish up and we'll have just that one end at the very end to bury. I like to hide it somewhere under those wings, and you'll be all set with your own turkey squish. And that's how to crochet the turkey squish and the mini turkey squish, both free patterns on mooglyblog.com. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.